Welcome to Rad Health, where we have the conversations that you wish you had with your doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Cooper. I'm a chiropractor and functional medicine physician, husband, father, combat veteran, and guy who generally likes primal stuff. Welcome to the show. All right, today we have a wonderful guest. His name is Dr. Carlos Garcia, a psychologist that I had met a few times in the past and vibed with. So I thought I would bring him on and talk about things that might be important in your life. Today, we are going to talk about a number of things, but one of the main topics I'd like to talk about today is the concept of betrayal. And this runs into many aspects of people's lives, whether it's personal, romantic relationships or business relationships. So being that it is something that tends to be a difficult emotion to get past, I wanted a professional to talk about it, have us understand where it comes from, and talk about some paths past the emotion of betrayal. Welcome, Dr. Carlos Garcia.
Dan, thank you so much for having me on your show, brother. Big fan of what you do. Big fan of your work. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today talking about this thing, betrayal, huh? We almost just kind of cringe at the thought of it, right?
Yes, it is a cringy concept. Yeah. So tell me a little about your practice. What are you doing these days?
Yeah, Dan. So I just actually sold my practice. So I have a private practice, or had a private practice, I should say, here in the Tampa, Florida area, where we provide a lot of therapy and counseling services for our community and folks abroad. And really, I'm sort of stepping out into corporate America now. One of the reasons I'm doing that is that I sort of noticed over time that a lot of the similar sort of struggles that people were having, that they were coming in for with individual therapy, they were also experiencing in the workplace. And I also found that a lot of the tools I was being able to give folks in individual therapy was also very beneficial for them to get unstuck in the workplace. So I wrote a book last year, which essentially the sort of nature of it is like telling corporate America to go to therapy to help them see the value of like working on the self and being a better leader. So these days I'm getting out there more. I'm in the corporate space doing more wellness and leadership stuff. And it's been really grand, man, because I think it's really being accepted in a way that probably would have been not so welcome many years ago.
I agree. I think there's an awakening happening in that perspective. So I think that's really cool. Yeah. And it makes total sense if you're having whatever negative situation happen in a personal relationship, well, business is just a bunch of people together also. So it's relationships.
Right. At the end of the day, any organization it's people, right? And what I have spent the last 10 years doing is helping people get unstuck from conscious barriers, unconscious barriers, especially those unconscious ones as a psychologist, and helping people thrive. So why couldn't we bring that into a group setting and do the same thing?
Sounds great. Yeah. The unconscious barriers, the ones you don't know about.
Exactly. Those are the
real sticklers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations on your move toward something that you apparently been looking to do. Yeah. So that's great.
Thank you.
Moving yourself forward. So you want to jump into betrayal?
Let's get into it.
Okay. So from probably an initial look, the psychological underpinnings of betrayal and what is happening in our heads when we have that feeling of betrayal.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we're going to really dissect this thing, we need to look at several factors that are probably playing out. I think that probably at the core of betrayal is trust, right? We have to have had some level of trust in some other person or some expectation that we had, that when that trust got betrayed, when that trust was broken, that we experienced that feeling of betrayal, right? If we weren't invested in trusting someone or in the relationship, if we weren't invested in it some way, energetically, emotionally, or psychologically, we probably wouldn't experience the betrayal to the degree that we do when the trust is there in a much sort of more robust way, right?
Makes sense. I mean, if you're not, if you're not invested, like if something falls apart, who cares?
Yeah. Um, I think another sort of component, and maybe this is getting more into the weeds, Dan, but I think it's important, is our perceived notion of how we trust others in the world, right? For me as a clinical psychologist, it always feels so critical to help people understand the nature of their thoughts, the nature of their opinions, the nature of their beliefs as adults. And the way that I do that is by helping them explore their early upbringing, right? So, for example, let's just put this betrayal and trust to the side for a second, right? Because I think this can really just give us a lot of meat to what we're going to talk about. But let's say you grow up in a home where I don't know, you have a parent that is always promising you things
Uh-huh.
and is always falling short and not following through. We're going to go on that trip and then that doesn't happen. Dad was going to, take you to the park and then dad gets busy with work, right? Where like the constant sort of message you received as a child is like your hopes got sort of pulled up and then sort of either that person or life was just like, oh no, right? Like that's.
Uh-huh.
If we experience a lot of that broken trust early on, we start to develop again and unconsciously sort of a protective mechanism that sort of says like, hey, I'm just going to be really vigilant and cautious of like any time that somebody's telling me something really good or offering me something of value. Now, you're probably not even consciously recognizing that you're learning this early on in your development. But what that can sort of tend to lead to is much later on, it becomes really hard for you to trust much of anybody. And so you sort of walk out into the world sort of projecting people are going to let me down. I'm someone that can get let down. And it might impact the way, like how much you open yourself to any particular relationship, interaction, or way that you're engaging the world. So that's just one example. Um, Another example might be the opposite of that, right? Like maybe in your life you just had people that when they told you a thing was going to happen or that they were going to show up, they showed up, and so you might have developed a different opinion, a different belief, a different attitude about the world. Because as children, what we experience in our early environment is what we then project out in how we experience the world. We sort of generalize that, right? Like if our early caretakers developed a good sense of trust in us, we're going to tend to believe that the world is a safe place and that we can go out there and trust. And that even if that trust is betrayed, that we're going to be okay. So I think that's important to understand how we then perceive betrayal later on from our lens, right? But I think, again, coming back to this issue of trust, like that is, if we really think about it, like so core to our species, right? Like we needed to trust the tribe. We needed to trust the people that were going to care for us. We needed to build community and relationships. We needed to be able to trust in one another. So it's almost core and vital to the ways that we navigate relationships. So when that shifts, again, when there's betrayal, when we experience a rupture in that trust, yeah, our nervous system and our psychology is going to be like, hey, wait a second here. What's going on? Right. And before we even get to the sort of feelings of like, guilt or sadness or the crappy feelings that might come up, just know that your nervous system is on alert saying, what happened here?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that somebody who had experienced letdown during those developmental years and so kind of expect letdown would be less prone to those extreme feelings of betrayal in the future or not? Because it seems like if they're expecting betrayal or letdown, then they might not get hammered so hard when they actually do get let down.
Yeah, I think it could go one of two ways. I think if you learned early on how to navigate letdown and realize like, hey, I'm going to be okay. I still got my own back, or there's still other people that I can trust and I can come to, and we can learn how to work through the emotions of that betrayal. We might develop a great deal of resilience where you sort of go out in the world. And I mean, Dan, in a lot of ways, I think you hit it spot on. Like people are going to let you down at some point in your life.
Sure.
People are going to show up and act selfishly. People are going to betray you. People are going to stab you in the back. Friends are going to decide not to be friends with you. At some point in your life, probably a partner that you really loved and trusted is going to, I don't know, cheat or again, like betray that trust, rupture that trust in a big way. Like there's not a lot of us that can escape that throughout the course of our lives. So I think it's a matter of like, can we learn to navigate those things in a way where we can develop resilience? What tends to be on the other side of that coin, which is, going into this place of, what's wrong with me? The world is a tough place. I'll never get out of this. And just maybe getting stuck in the funky emotions of that, which no judgment. I think that's okay too. I remember, in 2014 having been in a relationship for like 3.5 years, and I had just now moved across the country to do an internship where we were expecting to sort of, settle down after that. And like 3 months into this person just says, "Hey, I don't want to be together anymore," and just disappeared off the face of the earth. Didn't give me a real reason why. And I'll tell you, man, I was late 30s, and that really that tore me up. Like, that was really hard for me. I spent the next year in like somewhat of a depressive state, trying to understand like what went wrong, what did I do? I mean, talk about ghosted. Like this was somebody we had been talking about,
explanation.
like marriage and stuff. And so, I say no judgment because sometimes that betrayal is strong enough to really, really tear you apart.
Yeah, and closure is one thing, but not even a reason or a heads up.
Right.
Yeah, that makes it a lot worse.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's I say all of that to say this is a very complex topic that we're talking about, and so I love that we're talking about it to see if we can deconstruct it in a way to pull it apart in a way where we can understand it a little bit better for when it does show up in our lives.
Do you think there's anything that would precipitate somebody to be more prone to turning the, I don't blame is the right word, but the weight of the betrayal situation on themselves versus the other person?
Yeah. Yeah. So here again, like we would have to look at, right? Like if we had an example that, let's use the example I was just talking about. I spent the rest of that year after that breakup blaming this person.
Right.
Because it was the easiest thing to do. It was the way that I can feel the best about what was happening. Even though I didn't have a clue what had happened, it was just easier to be like, oh, this was a reflection of you. You did this to me. How could you? Right. Whereas like the stories that kept playing out in my mind. After some distance from it. So here's an interesting thing, Dan, was a year later after I had completed my internship and was coming back to Florida, a friend reached out to me and she said, "Hey, I know it's been a while, but I found out some things about this person you had been dating," because she was sort of a mutual friend. She was in the same grad program. And I know you still don't know what happened. I'm going to leave it up to you. Like, if you want to know, I'm happy to share the information. And if you've moved on and it doesn't matter, like, cool too. And I remember messaging her back and be like, "No, like I'm good. I've healed. I'm better." She's like, "All right, cool." And then like over the next 2 days, the curiosity was just eating at me.
Pouring into you.
It's just like, it was killing me, man. And I was like, for my own closure, I need to know what happened here. And so what she ended up sharing was that this ex-girlfriend of mine had gotten back with like her college boyfriend. They ended up, sort of reconnecting, and they ended up getting married and I think having kids. But that was valuable and important to me, man. And I'll tell you why. One, it was the closure of like at least understanding what happened, because early on, I think a part of me was doing what you were saying, was like, what did I do wrong? How could I have been different? What could I have done better? Just really like in my head trying to explore where I messed up. But also, Dan, that story was a big part of my own narrative that I grew up with, of always being the person that did something wrong, always needing, like always feeling guilty. So I say all that to say, now we have the sort of layout of the picture. Here's somebody that decided they just wanted to up and and without cheating on me, I guess start a relationship with somebody else, and to have not gone through the process of maybe communicating that in a healthier way and just kind of disappeared. So, okay, we can look at that and be like, Carlos, it wasn't your fault. But there was the part where I was totally self analyzing and in my own ego, sort of reflecting on like, what could I have done different? Um, Later on with some time, as you know, I was more fully healed, I was able to see the parts that I contributed there. I was able to see the
Right.
parts that I unconsciously was maybe not allowing myself to believe about the relationship, the ways that I was over functioning in the relationship, the ways in which, really interestingly, and this is a big one, Dan. When I first met her, she kept telling me stories of these guys that she had dated for a while and would like keep calling her and being like, "Hey, but why won't you talk to me?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's so weird." Right?
Interesting.
I mean, how do we miss those things, you know?
Yeah. I'm a professional ghoster. I'm telling you up front, don't listen to me though.
Right. 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 So I think when we talk about betrayal, um, I think a healthy way to maneuver through it is to take responsibility and sort of see if there were parts in that relationship or in that interaction that you can take responsibility for. Maybe not all of it, but like, man,
Mhm.
every relationship.
Well, you can't really take responsibility for
Yeah.
all of it. There's
Yeah.
always a back and forth.
I always say, you know, I do a lot of couples work. Every relationship is 50-50. Like there's a responsibility on me, there's a responsibility on the other person. Even if that responsibility is, hey, I allowed this to be a thing until I decided not to allow it. Yeah, but you reinforced it for a long time in that person,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, because when you allow something for a long period of time, you're telling them it's okay to treat me like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that we're 100% responsible for the way other people treat us. And we do that based on what we reinforce, what we allow, where we don't set boundaries. And, you know, like that's something I've had to sort of overcome in my own life. I'm somebody that always led with kindness, compassion, trust, allowing. And you know, obviously there are ways in which that comes back and it bites you because people take advantage of it, people do whatever. You can't then be angry at the other person. I mean, you can be, but like
Sure, you can always.
you have responsibility in that as well.
You know, one thing I was thinking um, was about about blaming yourself piece is
Yeah.
the intuition. I know you have an interest in the spiritual side of life,
Yeah.
and uh, listening to your intuition, not listening to your intuition. Uh, at least in my life, whenever I felt this way, there's always been a component of, if I would have acknowledged the things that were tickling me in the back of my head, and not just said, no, I don't want it to be that, so I'm not going to acknowledge that. Um, yeah, I could have averted a lot of difficulties along the way. And so that intuitive piece, I think it's worth. Somebody said something really cool to me when I was doing a diplomate in neurology, which is a specialty in neurology,
Yeah.
and chiropractic. You have diplomates for specialties, and somebody said that intuition is a right brain intelligence. So it's one of those things that if you will lean into an intuition, you're actually exercising that more emotive
Yeah.
and internalizing right side of the brain, which I thought was kind of cool. We're very analytical in society where it's numbers, it's this or that, it's black and white, and so that's a very left-brained kind of way to be.
Absolutely.
And so we've ignored the right brain side of life for I don't know, I couldn't put a year on it, but a lot of societal timeline has been kind of pushing off that intuitive piece of life. And it's funny how accurate it is.
Yeah.
The gut feeling, we still talk about that. You still talk about the gut feeling, and but do you listen to it?
Yeah, brother. So much to unpack here. I think, right, we often hear in society like, oh, you you need to be able to see the red flags in something, right? Like just pay attention to the red flags. But it's not that easy. Oftentimes the red flags are a little orange, right? Or even yellow. And so it's just like you're like, oh, I don't know here. I think at any given point, in any given moment, we're sort of deciphering a large series of data about how to make a decision, right? It's never that black or white. And so that's why I like these things about the red flags, the red flag. Like, yeah, I hear that. But oftentimes, again, let's just keep coming back to this example, right? Like at the beginning stages of that relationship, I wasn't open to hearing how she had treated all these other men. I just wanted the relationship. I wanted her.
Right.
So you put those things on a balance and you're like, okay, well, those guys must have been, dummies, right? What,
Sure.
like what goofballs, right? Like I'm different, what you listen,
I'm different.
right. I'll tell you this, man, as a psychologist, it's impressive to me how humans devise ways of convincing themselves, of justifying things, of rationalizing things to believe it in a way that like it feels like a core truth and a reality when it really isn't. It's a story that you're selling yourself on. Now, again, no judgment there. I probably still do that, most days around certain things. But to the other point you said, which is the self blame, I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace there, because if we do acknowledge that at any given point, we're trying to do the best that we can with the information in front of us, right? It's always easy to look back and be like, that's the thing I missed. That's the thing I missed. That's the thing I missed. But when you're in it, you don't see it because you don't see it. Because a lot of times we have blinders on, because a lot of times our desire for the other thing that's coming with might take us over and be like, yeah, I know that I should probably listen to my gut here, but my desire in this other place is sort of trumping that. And that's what feels more important to me in this particular instance. Right. So it's not that easy. It only looks easy looking back and being like, I should have listened to my gut. I think that, to your point, if we think of our cultural programming from our earliest days, it's how to use the logical, rational mind. It's how to look at information and make informed decisions based on data, rationale, and logic. Right. We receive very strong messaging and beliefs that as long as we use our rational mind to make decisions, we'll be successful. We'll get to where we want to get, right? Like we become slaves to the rational mind is a line that Ram Dass used to say. And in doing so, in reinforcing that pattern so significantly in our lives from childhood to adulthood, we have blunted our capacity to listen to our intuition. And
it's too bad that
we just don't have the practice, right? Yeah.
Right. The practice. Yeah.
Right.
So it's too bad that isn't part of practice where you could even use it logically. You could say, all right, these are the objective pieces of information that I'm seeing. How do I feel about that?
Right.
And then take that information as information. It's a data point too.
Yeah.
And then you bring that into the objective, whatever's happening in the situation, and you mix them up, and then you make a decision based on that.
Absolutely, man. Einstein is known for having said, I didn't come to my theories of the universe through my rational mind. And he was known for often just, swimming in a pond or just being out for a walk, and a thought, an idea, an intuitive sort of thing would arise to him, and he often talks about that. That's sort of where he developed all so much of his understanding of the universe and his theories of relativity. And I just think as a society we've gotten away from using this other data point, which is our gut, our heart, right? Our intuition. We can call it sort of different things. I think that even the word intuition feels soft for some people, right? But yeah, there's a knowing there.
What is the word for those who are like very much not on the spiritual side of things for intuition?
Yeah.
I guess gut feeling.
The gut feeling. Yeah. And I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in one of his books. I don't remember which one. But it's this sort of aha moment, right? And I experience this all of the time. Like I'll be sitting in any given week with like some issue I need to resolve, and just going through all of the logical steps and trying to, compartmentalize and like think through it, like really apply thinking to the problem. And I just can't figure it out. And then I'll be on a run, or I'll just be doing something else, and boom, there it is. There's the answer. Oh, that's the clarity I was looking for.
There's a lot to that. So yeah, you go on a run, likely you're running outside. So there's an outside component to it, some in nature component to it. But then there's also the neurological component to that where you're task focused, but in running, it's kind of a repetitive task. You can get into a meditative state while doing repetitive tasks that don't take a lot of thought. John Muir, he said it's something really cool. This is definitely going to be a paraphrase, but it was something about to see the universe, go into the woods. And it was kind of a cool thing. We had chatted about this a second before we started recording, and the religious leaders from the inception of seemingly all religions in the world, the inception point was them being in the wilderness, and in the creation, unencumbered by the trappings of modernity, and they just get to be in and out of their mind at the same time.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man.
That's something that, I talk about this when, I know you're a veteran also, and when I was deployed, I felt like freaking Buddha, man, when I was deployed. And when I was coming home, I felt less like that. So I started to think like, well, what's the deal? Why did I feel so mentally free when I was there? And, part of it, I was outside a lot, but really it was the lack of distractions. Yeah. So now, and I always come to these three things that were the distractions. And it's only three. Yeah. And it's, am I going to get killed by somebody I don't see? Rockets, mortars, IEDs, and snipers, all of which happened to me while I was there. So they're intense, but it's one thing to worry about. Then when do I eat next? And when do I have to show up for the next mission? It's like, what do I got to bring with me? And when am I showing up?
Totally.
But that's kind of it. You don't have TV, you don't have phones. Like, you don't have all the things that are picking away at your attention.
Totally.
And when you have that space, which occurs also when you're in nature, you have this mental space, you can dig into whatever your mind wants to think about and not lose your way, not lose your track, and really contemplate. And that's where the good stuff happens.
Yeah, brother. Yeah. So back in April, I went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And so many of the things you're talking about now sort of showed up for me during that time. Now, I know the value of nature. I know the value of quieting the mind, but this was the first time I had committed to like a multiple day sort of, right? No TV, no books, no phones, not talking for 10 days and meditating, 12 to 14 hours a day. And it was in a beautiful place up in Georgia where, you're out in nature. The food's taken care of for you. The wake up call is taken, where you have to be at any, there's nothing to preoccupy your mind with. And if you have a pretty clear mind, that's great. You'll start to notice how, what kinds of insights will come up. If there's any darkness in there, that will also arise. That was part of my experience. Like, oh, these things I haven't been thinking about for years. Yeah, we got to clear some of that shit out first before we find, the more inner peace. But yeah, I think that the more simplistic we get, the less that's pulling at us for our attention and our constant sort of structure of the ways that we're going about our days day to day. When your mind starts to quiet, man, you can really start to find some beautiful stuff in there.
Yeah, I super agree. It's so interesting how that freedom, at least that's the concept that I feel like was my thing, was the freedom in my head. I felt good all the time.
Yeah.
I was doing things that didn't feel good in the moment, but it did not last. And even in the moment, I had such a good headspace that it didn't affect me negatively like so many stories that you hear.
Yeah. It's tough work, I think, for us, because we've been so conditioned to be on the go and in constant chaos all of the time, that when we experience these moments, like the one you had, like the one I sort of put myself into, that you really start to look at the nature of your thoughts and your behaviors from a very interesting vantage point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Did you go like pen and pad and were writing stuff down, right, during this time?
No, you can't do any of that. You're just
okay.
Yeah, you're alone with your thoughts, man. No watches, no nothing.
You hope those epiphanies stick then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're literally sitting with that mind and just noticing all of the things it says all day long and all the places it goes. And I mean, it's beautiful, right? Because after a few days, the mind starts to quiet. You start to sort of pick up on things, notice things. You actually start to notice nature. I remember after the
Hmm.
fourth or fifth day, it was just like listening to the rocks under my feet as I walked, noticing every little bug, noticing the birds, noticing the way the sun was coming through the trees, noticing the wind, how it felt on my skin, how it sounded in my ear. I mean, you really, really start to tap into the quietness of the moment.
You know what that makes me think of? I have a pretty extreme irk when I'm out in nature and somebody goes by with one of those portable speakers.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man, and I even say this. I'm like, what is my line? I say something to the effect of,
yeah,
like you're invading my auditory
yeah,
environment.
yeah, yeah,
Whatever. Like, you're stealing my peace right now,
yeah.
because I guess maybe I drop into that fast, and I am listening and to the sounds around me, and
Yeah.
that just like jolts
Almost,
me right out of it.
almost back to our topic, right? Like the betrayal in that moment, Dan.
You've betrayed my peace.
You've betrayed my peace. How dare you, human? You know. But no, that
Yeah.
brings up, I think, another component. We were talking about sort of that initial trust component of betrayal that needs to exist. I think another part is grief. We don't
Hmm.
often equate betrayal to grief, but it's very much there because part of the crappy feeling of betrayal is that you are now having to grieve what you right, like the future that you had created around that
Hmm.
expectation, that is no longer existing. And grief isn't just about losing a loved one. Grief shows up in a lot of ways. Grief shows up at the end of our careers when we need to retire, if we've endured an injury and can't exercise like we normally do. Obviously, when we have pretty intense breakups or ending of relationships, when we lose somebody. um, Grief can show up in so many ways.
Yeah, you say that, and I had a situation similar to yours, the breakup that you had mentioned, and um, that was the component that fried me.
Yeah,
I had, all the decisions I've been making were in a direction. I've been projecting what I wanted my life to be, what I was creating in my mind as a potential future, and
right.
so the stealing of that future,
Yeah,
at least my perception of that future, was definitely a component for me.
yeah,
One of the things I read a lot, I read quite a bit when I was deployed, and um, I mean, some of it was novels type stuff, but a lot of it was, I guess, the category moves self help, but like
yeah,
7 Habits of Highly Effective
yeah,
People, like that kind of
yeah.
self help stuff.
Awesome.
And one of the books that I found on a dusty shelf in Baghdad that I freaking loved was by Jiddu Krishnamurti, and it's called Think on These Things. And one of the things he says in there is
Mhm.
that the mother of all disappointment is expectation.
Yes,
And so that future projection that you're creating
totally.
is an expectation for your future, and it hasn't come to be yet. So
Yeah,
it's actually inappropriate
yeah,
to have any expectation really,
yeah,
because until it happens, it's not real.
totally.
But if you have created that as truth in your mind and it's gone, then you get that disappointment.
Yeah, man. Let me just sort of take it to a place where I know listeners might be like, yeah, I hear that, but you know, there's there's there's
Yeah, make it more
there's
tangible.
great wisdom in that, but I'm not doing that. Um, yeah, Krishnamurti. So I study a lot of Buddhist philosophy, and part of what you learn when you study that is about the idea of impermanence. That everything is impermanent, everything is constantly changing, and anything you're trying to hold on to can create inner suffering. Right. So, in Buddha's words, it's the four noble truths. The first noble truth is that there is suffering in the world, because simply taking a human existence, you're going to experience things you don't want to experience. That's going to feel like dis-ease, suffering. You're going to not experience things you do want to experience. That's going to create suffering. And even when you do experience the experiences you want, they're eventually going to come to an end, because everything is in time and everything's impermanent. So that's, first noble truth is that there's suffering. The second noble truth is that suffering is our preferences. There's this great line. I think it's in the Tao Te Ching that says the great way is easy for he who does not have preferences. Right? That the nature of our suffering is because we want the universe to be other than the way it is. And so the second, I want to go fishing and it's raining outside. Now I'm upset. I wanted this relationship to last forever. It ends. Now I'm devastated. Right? And so in the clinging to the things that we have, or in the pushing away of things that we feel like we don't want to have, we create a massive amount of internal suffering. That if you're able to navigate the world from a place of detachment, from a place of less preference, from a place of acknowledging that the universe is unfolding in any given moment, moment to moment, the way that it is, and that the only reason you are in a state of agitation, a state of depression, a state of anxiety, a state of distress, is because you're wanting it to be other than how it is.
So this is an interesting segue. This is something that I struggle with or pondered, whatever the term you want to use, when I was deployed. This might have been in Think on These Things or one of the other books I read, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And so if that is the case, and I subscribed to it. I said, this is a great idea. This sounds good to me, and I would like to be like this. Yeah. Can you love fully with full detachment? And is life as precious if there aren't lows to highlight the highs?
Yeah.
I didn't have an answer. It seemed like, dang, it might mean you have a pretty good life as you go, but you never really have the big highs if you remain detached. What do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things I can say here. I didn't know we were going to get this deep, but let's go, man. We're there. Let's do it, right? I think the practice of learning to be detached, it's simply a tool. Like the point that the objective isn't to win the game. Although for most of us, that's what we believe most of life is, right? Winning. It's simply a tool. It's a strategy that helps you become freer, that helps your soul sort of move in the direction of nirvana, self-actualization, whatever you want to call it. So the understanding of attachment and aversion simply gives you the framework from which to navigate the world so that you can see the places where you're overly attached or overly pushing away, so that you can take that information then and sort of learn to shift, learn where you need to make a change. Maybe it's a mindset thing. Maybe it's a behavior thing. Maybe it's a perspective shift that you need to make. And through that process, you become a freer and freer being. Through that process, you're less yanked around by the reactions you're having to the way that the world is, right? So that's a big one. I mean, I think you just put a big one in front of people. Like, how do you love without attachment? And I think the objective is not to not love for the sake of not being attached, but to love fully, just in an unattached way, right? To be, this comes pretty much straight out of the Bhagavad Gita, which is like, don't be attached to the fruits of your labor, is one of the major messages there, which is like, go out into the world and do good to do good, do things to do things, but don't be so caught up in what you're getting in return. And don't be attached or don't be identified with the doer, right? And the reason I say this is deeper is because now we're getting into this conversation of like the soul, right? Like, are we just these bodies? Do we just come and we're here for, 70 to 90 years? And maybe some people believe that. I believe that there's something much deeper in us that is guiding this human experience. And that this human experience is only in the service of helping that soul expand or evolve in the way that it needs to. So I think that all these things are tools, right? Whether it's a Buddhist philosophy, a Hindu philosophy, a Christian philosophy, they're all ways that we can sort of learn to be in the world with much more peace, much more freedom, and living in this detached way. once we understand the tools, then we can look at our lives in particular and be like, oh, that's a hard one. Like, Dan, for Christ's sake, you're going to tell me like not be attached to the deep desire that I have for my son to live every day and for me to love him. No, I'm deeply attached to that, because that's one of those places where but here's another place, right? Like, I'm deeply attached to success. That has been a big place of where I've poured my desires and my needs and my goals. And I've noticed that it's also a place where I've had to experience a lot of suffering, a lot of distress, because it hasn't always looked the way I've needed it or wanted it to. And as I've started to back off and be like, oh, it's okay. However it turns out is going to be great. Like, I can be rooted in just as much happiness with what I'm making now than if I made another $200,000. I can be just as okay with where I live now than the bigger house. And I can actually be just as okay if we have to end up moving into a small apartment because something went wrong financially. I'm going to be okay either way. Right. And so I think for each of us, we can notice that there are certain ways in our lives where we are attached, where there's something that just has a strong hold. The beauty in that is that, like, that is your road to liberation, right? Like, that's where you shine the light so that you can see how you can become free.
It would seem to me also that if you do have this understanding of attachment and it's in your thought process when you do either decide to or recognize that you have an attachment to something, if something goes wrong with it, it seems like, so long as you understand the concept of attachment and how it affects you and how it affects your perceptions of things, then if it turns to crap, then you might recover from it faster by recognizing, I was just attached to this thing, but I'll be okay, like you're saying.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. One of the examples I use here, and people might judge this or not, but I'm deeply in love with my wife, and we have such an amazing relationship, right? And I don't know, from where I'm standing, I mean, my hopes is that she continues to be a part of my life from here, until the end, either her end or mine. And I'm also fully aware of the changing nature of the human experience, impermanence. And I'm fully aware that there might be a point, I don't know, later on, like, hey, why were you on that podcast so long? This is it. I'm packing my bags. I'm leaving. Next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't know, when our kid gets, who knows? Where she might say, I don't think I want to be in this relationship anymore. And I don't have a say in that. I mean, I could fight for but like, if someone else has made the choice, like, and so I recognize that as an absolute possibility. And will it be tough? I'm sure it will. And will I recover? I'm sure I will. Will it be sad? I'm sure I'll navigate some sadness. I'm sure I'll move through some grief. And will I be okay? I know I most absolutely will.
Yeah, the recognition that it is two separate people. They're autonomous beings living a life together, and you might change differently.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, you see these couples that are kind of different and then they seemingly become the same person, then navigate through life together. Right. Sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think that is a kind of also what could come from that is that if you recognize that it's possible, instead of expecting that everything is forever, then you might cherish the relationship more in the moment as well.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too that often can happen to us in relationships is we become afraid. We're so afraid to lose it that we start to grab on too tightly. That can look all kinds of different ways, from a controlling partner to just a like, why don't you love me anymore? Like at the slightest sort of inconvenience in the relationship, maybe we need couples that, like, we're holding on too tightly, and that can create issues as well. Right. So, coming back to this sort of living from a place of surrender, from a place of detachment, it's about starting to pay attention to like the thoughts, pay attention to my nervous system, pay attention to the ways that I'm engaging the world. And if I'm pulling away too strongly, too quickly, too fiercely, with too much fear, there's probably something I need to learn there. And if I'm trying to grab onto something too fiercely with too much fear, just like with too much greed, with whatever, there's probably something I need to look at there. Right. It's all about the
Mhm.
middle way, the path that's in the middle that doesn't have to feel so restrictive and so consuming. And as somebody who's been, really sort of working on this for the last 4 or 5 years of my life, I can tell you, man, there's just greater peace, right? Like at any given moment, I understand and have been betrayed by employees, by relationships in the last couple of years. And I'm like, cool, man, that didn't feel good and that sucked, but like there's just things I can't control. And if I decide to spend the next 6 months to a year in my thoughts about what a horrible person that was, or I hope that they get theirs, or like then I'm just carrying around a bunch of like anger and resent and grief that is not serving me day to day. So I want to let that go as quickly as I can.
The kids these days would say that they're you're letting somebody live rent free in your head.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, I've spent so much energy, man, clearing out that space. I only want goodness in there, so I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife likes to say something to the effect of things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And so to take the step back and to see, you feel like something, we're talking about betrayal. So you feel betrayed. All right, well, what lesson did that teach you? Was it that you, like all the things we talked about, do you need to tap into your intuition more and actually listen to it when you feel it? Do you need to do more left brain stuff and be more objective in the actual actions that are happening? They say people's actions speak louder than their words. Are you looking at those actions and cataloging those as this is aligned, this is not aligned? So yeah, there are always lessons to be learned. And maybe there are lessons about yourself. Maybe there are lessons about, and typically it is about yourself. Because even if it's about somebody else, it's about how you're interacting with that person.
Absolutely.
Are you watching what they're doing? Are you listening to what they're saying? Are you something about somebody else? And
Yeah, man.
I like that perspective too. I think that can force you, if you take it, that advice, it would force you out of the maelstrom of emotion to look at it. Right. And so that could be your path to a more objective look at whatever crazy emotion thing is happening with you.
Totally, brother. One of the most significant and best mindset shifts that I have made in my life is taking 100% responsibility for my life. And by that, I mean, regardless of how a thing turns out, what was my role in it? What can I learn from it? And what do I want to do differently? Because for many years, Dan, especially having coming out of the Marine Corps, and then also having worked, I think, in a sort of paramilitary organization, I was all about control, right? Controlling other people, controlling situations, right? And so many of us can sort of fall into that way of living, where like the only time we're okay is if people are treating me this way and if life is unfolding this way. And what I started to notice is that I was living with more stress and living with just constant dis-ease, because guess what? Here's a crazy thing. I wasn't able to control everything outside of myself. Like,
who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought, right? So after years of just struggling with that and always just being upset and always being frustrated because the person in front of me isn't driving the way I need them to, and the person at the grocery store isn't moving fast enough, and the thing didn't do the thing that you wanted it to do, I'm like, man, there has to be a different way to navigate this life. And it was taking full responsibility. It's like, I'm not going to blame. I'm not going to point the fingers anymore. I'm going to use every experience in my life to grow me, to learn me, to see where I can let go, to see where I can just show up with more ease, where I can have less judgment, where I can have more compassion, where I can love a little bit more, where I can have a little bit more tolerance. And so now, right, like even when people do me wrong, or when something goes a way that I didn't want it to go, I don't react. I notice my reaction. I notice the emotion, and I'm like, okay, what do I want to learn here? Because I want to live in a way that people could be out there doing whatever people are going to do. And, inevitably that's a part of life. Some people are going to be kind. Some people are going to be a-holes like that. That's just right. Like, None of us are immune to
Just how it,
that. So I don't want to. Yeah, I just want to be in more peace, man. And so when I did that, when I shifted that mindset to be like, whatever's unfolding in my life is going to be a lesson for me, and I'm going to use that to grow. It's changed everything.
we talk about the bad things, but the good things too. So
Totally.
something goes great in your life. Awesome. How did I make, what were the circumstances that made this awesome? And then you try
Yeah,
and replicate those or
absolutely.
support those happening as well.
Absolutely.
Not just checking out the bad
Yeah.
stuff.
And here's sort of what happened was when I was less preoccupied with the bad, I just started to notice that like life is life. Like I can be just as grateful in the good moments as I could in the bad moments. Um,
And I was,
and to be honest,
you
like
were
the good moments also felt, much greater too, because you're just like, I mean, I'll be honest about that, right? But then I'm like, okay, well, let's not get too attached. Because listen, if shit's going bad in your life, if you're depressed, if you're sad, here's the truth: things are going to change. And also, if like, man, you're just like 10 out of 10, life is awesome, and you're happy, and things are going great, I got a truth for you: things are going to change.
things are going to change. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know, it's really funny. If you were, I could see somebody telling you this. We said good and bad, like we put a judgment on
Right.
your situation. But if you were fully embodying the things you're talking about that are so difficult in the human experience, uh, the bad quote fingers
Mhm.
are just as good as the good because they're all lessons.
Yeah,
And
you're
I
absolutely
hate
right.
hearing that advice. Oh, shut up, because I don't like hearing it. But
Yeah.
if you were to be 100% locked
Yeah.
into this concept,
Yeah.
that's the case.
Yeah, you're
It's all
absolutely
about,
right.
like you're saying, like trying to achieve this nirvana state for
Yeah,
this spirit within me right now,
totally.
trying to find whatever its highest being
Totally.
is. Well, it's just trying to navigate a life to build upon skills
Yeah.
to internal skills to become the highest version of that spirit self. So good and bad are all just information to help build upon that.
You're 100% right, brother. In the labeling it good and bad is where we build that attachment and aversion that we were talking about. So you're absolutely right. It's about experiencing life. This is just another experience. Here's just another emotion. I talk about this around emotions a lot. There aren't good or bad emotions. All emotions are just they're just emotions. It's in our labeling them good and bad that we start to push them away or want to feel more of this one or less of that one. Um, and you're absolutely right. I've trained myself to be less reactive to my own emotions, whether it's grief, sadness, shame, love, bliss, joy. And I notice that they yank me around a lot less, um, because you're absolutely right. It's just more stuff, right? It's more data from which to learn.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I like to think of emotions. I might have heard this somewhere, or maybe I come up with it. I don't know, but I like to think of emotions as a compass as to your alignment with your highest self.
ooh, love
And
that,
so
man.
if you're feeling crappy, what is it? What is it that is not being aligned with my highest self? And you're just on high, feeling great.
Yeah,
Okay, I am aligned. What is it that's aligned? So it's again just information,
yeah,
but a compass as to how close you are
I love that.
to that alignment.
I love that. Yeah, I've used the analogy of they're just road signs, on your journey. They're just cueing you
Mhm.
into something that you probably need to pay attention to internally. So, yeah, that's powerful.
Cool. So personal skills. We touched on a handful of them along the way.
Yeah.
If you were to give somebody a toolkit for, we talk about enough things where we could just go back to straight betrayal if you want to, or you could just call it negative emotions, but a personal toolkit
Yeah.
for navigating this life in a happier fashion
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
fashion
Yeah.
of more peace.
Yeah.
What do you think you'd hit somebody with? And I don't know if you have like a top 3 or
Yeah.
a top 10 or what the cluster is, but what do you think?
Yeah. So I think on this topic of emotions, I think that there's a lot of value to do some learning there, right? The reason is because they're a part of our lives, and we all experience them, right?
Mhm.
Anybody who has ever tried to go into sort of high stakes situation, thinking that, they're going to use rationale and logic. And then, somebody says something you don't like, and all of a sudden you're upset, knows that, the brain will, the part of our brain that evolved to experience emotion evolved before the part of our brain that is responsible for logic and reason, which is why we get hijacked by emotions often. And then the other sort of thing to consider there, Dan, and I talk about this a lot, is think about how most of us grew up. So if we were experiencing sadness or grief or distress or sort of shame or anger or sadness, most of us grew up in a generation where we were told to suck it up, right? Or even if, it was a little less harsh of a tone, it was like, well, what are you upset about? There's nothing to be upset about. Or maybe it was even harsher. For me, it was like, I'm here, a spanking, and then like, do you want me to keep giving you something to cry about? Right? Like, so on the spectrum, it shows up differently. But the core message that came across for many of us was that, again, those quote negative emotions are not okay. They're not to be tolerated. They're not to be seen. They're not to be experienced. So in both conscious and unconscious ways, from the time we were little, we started to repress those emotions. And what happened in the repressing of these emotions is that we built these big, scary monsters that live in the closet around these negative emotions. So none of us know how to feel them. So when we got to adulthood and experienced heartbreak, betrayal, the loss of a pet or a loved one, like the thought of experiencing sadness is so overwhelming. Just the thought of experiencing it, not even experiencing it, right? And so like with a lot of my therapy clients, when I share with them, like, hey, we need to work with these emotions, we need to have them, express them, process them, whatever the word I use, they're like, they immediately have anxiety because they're like, no, that's an ugly monster. I don't want to. And I get it, because that's how it looked like for me for many years. I grew up in a Hispanic home. Boys don't cry, you don't feel. Then I was in the military. I mean, how do they feel about crying, you think, Dan, right? And then I was a fireman for many years. And it wasn't until I finally went to therapy and became a therapist that was like, oh, this space is okay. Like, we need to work through our grief. We need to work through our sadness. We need to work through our pain. We need to work through guilt. We need to work through betrayal. So my sort of number one tool would be find whatever ways you need to find. I don't care if that's a book or a counselor or whatever, but start to learn the process of allowing yourself to be with your emotions. And look, we got it with the good ones, the happiness and the joy. Those are easy. But with these other ones,
take those.
Yeah, with these other ones, right? How can we sort of come up to the edge of them, notice them, start to experience them, embody them more, and then you become less afraid of them. They stay stuck for a lot less time. Like some of the research has shown that an emotion is only really experienced for no more than 90 seconds. So like when you actually allow yourself to feel sadness, you'll feel it for about 90 seconds in your body, and your nervous system will recuperate. Where most of us experience the sort of dread the dread of it is in the pushing it down, because now it's stuck and it has nowhere to go, right? Kind of like an energy that's just boxed in. So that would be my first tool, man, is like, really, let's learn to process our emotions. Let's learn to be okay with our emotions. It doesn't make us anymore, that old narrative that it makes us weak. Like, that's just bullshit, man. Like that, there's too much data and research out there that shows us that that's just a story. I'd say that probably the second one is we can use the word attachment and aversion, but really start to like lean into the places of discomfort in your life. If you spend your life, or just kind of building a life for yourself that's constantly avoiding any discomfort, you're reinforcing a deep pattern in yourself that the only way you're ever going to be okay is if you're in that comfort. If everybody's talking to you, yeah, exactly. So adopt this sort of way of experiencing life of like looking for where you're too comfortable. Where is there some discomfort? Why am I uncomfortable there? Why does this thing scare me? Why does this thing make me worry? And lean into that, because there's such great wisdom in that. Like, as I adopted that in my life and just started doing harder things, or looking at the places where I'm afraid, or where I uh, again have preferences, where that thing worries me, where I have anxiety, where where I'm just feeling some discomfort, and I start to look there, and I shed some light there, and I sit with that there, I recognize that eventually, one, I walk away with a ton of wisdom, a ton of new understanding about myself. Two, the thing stops bothering me because I've
Sure.
confronted it, I've faced it.
Yeah, you shine light on it, so it's not just this dark, the monster in the dark.
Right, man. Right. Um, yeah, man. And if I was going to say a third thing, I think if we sort of look at many of the layers that contribute to how we adopt a model of how we're living, right? So, for example, growing up in a very individualistic culture that really highlights and values the ego and who you are and your personality and being the best and being better than everyone else. When we just look at ego development from a child development perspective, we have a lot of focus on ourselves, right?
Hmm.
We spent last year $13.2 billion or $13.8 billion on self help. Like, we're a society of people that's always reflecting inward. And I just wonder what it might look like if we started reflecting outward,
Hmm.
right? If we started to adopt more of a way of living about service, about others. My sense is that we'd be less anxious. My sense is that would be a lot less depressed as a society. And my sense is that we'd start really embodying a lot more gratitude, a lot more love, and probably shifting a lot of the relationships, both individually and on a community, on a society level, in ways that we can't even fully understand.
Yeah, you hear about isolation feelings a lot. And yeah, if you're actually examining how you're interacting with others, you're having to examine others and project how you think they're feeling, and actually like try and embody what they're going through if you're actually examining your interaction with others.
Yeah,
And
it,
yeah,
it
that's
is the
been
great. It is the
exacerbated.
greatest builder of empathy.
Right. Yeah, it's been a tough road the last decade and a half or so with the explosion of social media. But because you're not in front of people.
Yeah.
I talk about this with people and just communication in general. And there's different types of communication that you can interpret. There's the words that are being said. There's the tones. So there's the nonverbal stuff, the body language, and the tones that are being inflected upon these words. But then there's mirror neurons. If you're actually in proximity with somebody, you're experiencing their emotions as well. Now, whether you, like we talked about, whether you recognize your intuition or not, well, whether you accept that information and then do anything about it, that's on you. But that's a whole other arm of communication that you will lose if you're not actually with people.
Spot on, brother. Spot on.
Well, I appreciate the tools. So
Yeah.
as a recap for the tools,
Yeah.
I wrote them down.
Yeah.
So learn the process by which you can process and experience your emotions. Lean into discomfort and be okay with it, because you can learn a ton from that experience of discomfort. And then examine the layers of how we interact with life itself and with others in particular, to develop, and which we just mentioned, our empathy and our capacity for empathy.
Yeah. Let's recap that. Even like, learn to feel, learn to do hard shit, and learn to love other people,
Okay.
not just yourself.
That's way more concise. That's good.
for those out there that like the real concise,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Where can people contact you if they want to reach out,
man.
or just to interact with you further?
Sure. Yeah. So I usually share with folks to go to my Instagram account, Dr. Carlos A. Garcia. I post a lot of content about the things we've talked about and have shared today. And if people want to find me for any other purposes, they can go to my website, drcarlos.com. and just I share a little bit about my book there and some of the work that I'm doing now.
The Dr. Carlos A. Garcia, are there any dots in there or underscores or anything?
Yes, so it's dr. Carlos.a.Garcia.
I'm glad I asked.
Okay,
awesome.
I have the unfortunate of having one of the most common Hispanic names in all the world. So, yeah,
I will. I'm going to throw them the show notes
Appreciate
anyway.
it.
So, so they'll see it. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
This is I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny. I feel like I don't in my life. I don't talk about it that much anymore.
Yeah.
When like I mentioned, I learned a lot of this when I was deployed,
Right.
and I had this introspective mind. I talked about it a ton afterward, and it hasn't been part of my just the things that I talk about lately. And so I love when we get into it.
Yeah, brother. Thank you for having me on. I think I think there's a space where more of us are wanting to have these conversations. So I truly appreciate what you're doing and truly appreciate you having me on. And this was a beautiful talk, brother. Thank you.
Great. Well, folks, if you liked the conversation, hit a like for me, whether it's on social media or on the podcast of your choice. If you think you know somebody who would be benefited by this type of information, which probably is everybody, go ahead and hit subscribe and send that podcast to the person you think might benefit from the information. Get them to subscribe as well so they can get in on these conversations that you wish you had with your doctor. Thank you, and I will see you next time.